President Obama called his top national security advisors to a meeting at the White House this evening to talk about two unfolding crises. Russia sent more troops into eastern Ukraine today. More about that in just a moment. And the continuing threat from the Sunni Muslim terror group known as ISIS. If anyone thought the president was ready to order airstrikes against ISIS targets in Syria, he made it clear today he is not. Major Garrett is at the White House.
But I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet. I think what I've seen in some of the news reports suggests that folks are getting a little further ahead of where we're at than we currently are. And I think that's not just my assessment, but the assessment of our military as well.
More than 100 U.S. airstrikes have hit ISIS weapons and convoys in northern Iraq. But the president said defeating the militants there is not enough. Mr. Obama will soon send Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to build support for further action.
We can rout ISIS on the ground and keep a lid on things temporarily, but then as soon as we leave, the same problems come back again. So we've got to make sure that Iraqis understand in the end they're going to be responsible for their own security, and part of that is going to be the capacity for them to make compromises. It also means that states in the region stop being ambivalent about these extremist groups.
The president said airstrikes in Iraq will, in his words, remain limited and with moderate risk to U.S. forces. And Maurice, the president said if he decides to expand the air war into Syria, he will consult with, but not necessarily seek legal authority from Congress.
Federal agents tonight are investigating a big bank robbery. Cyber thieves broke into America's biggest bank, J.P. Chase. Homeland Security correspondent Bob Orr has the details on that. Bob?
Maurice, sources tell us the cyber attack happened earlier this month, and now the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service are trying to determine just how much damage has been done. Sources say a cyber thief may have gained unauthorized access to the data at J.P. Chase by hacking into the personal computer of a single bank employee. Some private account information reportedly was compromised in the breach, but so far, J.P. Chase says it's not seen any unusual fraud activity. And in a statement, the bank went on to say, companies of our size unfortunately experience cyber attacks nearly every day. We have multiple layers of defense to counteract any threats and constantly monitor fraud levels. Now, law enforcement and industry sources tell us this breach appears to be the work, Maurice, of criminal hackers, possibly working in Russia.
Our next story started with a tweet from a viewer to our Dr. John LaPook. It alerted us to a tactic some pharmaceutical companies are using to keep patients taking expensive brand name drugs instead of cheaper generic versions. Here's Dr. John with details.
54-year-old Michael Hitch of Maryville, Tennessee, has early onset dementia and says he is helped by an Alzheimer's medication called Namenda. The drug is due to go generic next year.
Right now, I've got plenty of them.
But Forest Laboratories, the company that makes Namenda, plans to stop the sale of the version that Hitch takes at least 6 months before a less expensive generic product could become available.
They have no excuse whatsoever to stop making that drug available. None.
The company is telling doctors to transition patients to a newer form, one that has additional patent protection and is unlikely to go generic for years. Industry critics believe this is an example of a forced switch. David Maris is a stock analyst with BMO Capital Markets who covers pharmaceuticals.
What's the purpose of a forced switch?
Forced switch is to get patients over to this new product as fast as possible, so that way when the patent goes off on the old product, that patients are already on the new product and there's no existing product left. All of a sudden, you don't have this cliff, you don't have a drop-off in sales like you would otherwise.
The retail price of Namenda is more than $300 a month. When generic companies compete, the price of a drug usually drops 70 to 80%. Namenda generates about $1.5 billion in annual sales. So loss of patent protection could translate to more than $1 billion in lost revenue in a single year.
When patients are forced to switch from one form of a product to another, do they just stay once they're switched?
Almost everyone stays. The reason drug companies do these forced switches is that the switches are sticky. So in most drugs, it's only about 10 to 20% ever go back to the generic.
The newer version, Namenda XR, is taken once a day, unlike the older version, which is taken twice a day. Hitch has tried Namenda XR and says it doesn't work for him.
They are yanking the rug right out from under me, and that is not fair play.
You're ticked off.
I am mad. Yes.
There will still be a liquid version of Namenda. Activist, the parent company of Forest Laboratories, declined our request for an interview. So we asked by email why the company decided to discontinue the sale of the twice-daily Namenda tablets, and if the transition to Namenda XR is a forced switch. The company responded, "We believe that the Namenda XR extended-release capsules have significant advantages over the twice-a-day Namenda tablets that are particularly meaningful for the Alzheimer's patient population and their caregivers."
Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York has been a champion of legislation against sexual misconduct. It's been a tough fight. And in a new book, Gillibrand reveals some of her male colleagues haven't all been gentlemen. Here's congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes.
You may not.
The Senate's long-standing rules of decorum apparently don't apply to a woman's weight. In an excerpt from her new book, New York's junior senator Kirsten Gillibrand says she endured an endless string of comments from male lawmakers after the birth of her second son in 2008. The prize comment, she writes, came from a Southern congressman who said, as he held my arm, "You know, Kirsten, you're even pretty when you're fat." When she exercised in the congressional gym, many of my older male colleagues felt compelled to offer advice, such as this gem: "Good thing you're working out because you wouldn't want to get porky." Even after she dropped 50 pounds, the comments continued. One of her favorite older members of the Senate squeezed her waist and said, "Don't lose too much weight now. I like my girls chubby." At a Politico panel in December, Gillibrand told me electing more women is the key to changing the tone in Washington.
So if we had more women in Congress, we would begin to break this cycle of dysfunction.
Of course, Gillibrand might get the last laugh if the boorish comments from her male colleagues help her to sell more copies of her new book, which is mostly about what else boosting the ranks of women on Capitol Hill.
I stand before you to share some unfortunate news on the fate of our missing pilot. We received notification from the site investigation team this evening that our pilot did not survive the accident. He died as a result of injuries sustained during yesterday's crash. This is a devastating day for the family of our deceased pilot and the members of the 104th Fighter Wing and the entire F-15 community. These tragedies remind us of the risks that our brave men and women in uniform take every day. Due to the nature of the incident, our investigations team could not enter the crash site safely yesterday until later this afternoon. Upon their initial survey, they discovered that our pilot did not safely eject from the aircraft. The pilot was pronounced deceased by the on-scene members of the crash investigation team in Virginia. At this time, we are officially transitioning from a search and rescue effort to a search and recovery operation.
A closely watched standoff between workers and owners of a New England supermarket chain has come to an end. Market Basket employees cheered today after learning that the former CEO, fired in a family feud, would be buying the company. Here's Elaine Quijano.
The worker revolt at Market Basket ended with today's triumphant return of CEO Arthur T. DeMoulis to the family business.
And words cannot express how much I love you.
Workers stopped supplying the chain's 71 stores after DeMoulis was pushed out by relatives in June. Employees feared new management would roll back benefits such as bonuses and college scholarships. Customers joined the protest too.
No one will ever walk out. 20,000 people will walk out for one man. And we did. And he came here today. I'm you, baby, man. Love you, Artie. You're the best.
The workers and others around the country viewed the rebellion as a victory of people over profits.
Yay, so happy you're back.
But Market Basket has lost millions in sales and needs to spend millions more to restock shelves. DeMoulis also has to pay more than $1.5 billion for the company. It's a tall order in a business where profit margins are tight. But freight handler Pete Favreau believes in Market Basket.
The customer support has been incredible. We know they're coming back, there's no question. But what the best part is the people that weren't customers before, they want to be a part of this. Of course they do. Why wouldn't you? Who shows this kind of loyalty to a supermarket?
Maurice, part-time workers who lost hours during the protests are being told to return. It could take up to 10 days to restock stores.
NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says he has heard his critics. In a letter sent to team owners today, Goodell announced tough new punishments for all league personnel who commit domestic violence offenses. Here's Jim Axelrod.
In announcing a new, tougher stance on domestic violence, Commissioner Roger Goodell took responsibility for being too lenient in a high-profile domestic violence case involving a star running back. "I didn't get it right," wrote Goodell in a letter sent to each NFL owner. Domestic violence and sexual assault are wrong. They are illegal. They have no place in the NFL and are unacceptable in any way. Goodell faced heavy criticism for his handling of the Ray Rice case. Rice is an all-pro running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Last winter, he and his then-fiancée were arrested for assault after an altercation between the two. Video captured Rice dragging the woman, now his wife, apparently unconscious after a fight.
I made a huge mistake, and I want to own it. I want to say it in front of my teammates and tell you I made a huge mistake. You know, these 2 games are going to hurt. These 2 games are going to hurt.
In the letter admitting his mishandling of the issue, Goodell announced a first offense of domestic violence or sexual assault by any employee of an NFL team will mean a 6-game suspension. A second offense will result in a ban from the league, though any offender can apply for reinstatement after a year. Goodell was clear this new policy does not apply just to players, but to owners, coaches, and high-level team personnel as well.
It's been another day of monster waves and dangerous rip currents on both parts of both coasts in this country. 2 powerful storms are responsible. Hurricane Cristobal in the Atlantic and Tropical Storm Marie in the Pacific. In Southern California, the surf hasn't been this big in nearly 20 years, drawing big wave surfers and huge crowds. Terry Okita is at Newport Beach.
The 15-foot waves did not scare off swimmers and surfers despite the danger. There have been more than 500 rescues since Tuesday across Southern California.
Everything's enhanced during the swell.
Lifeguard Carson Hill helped save 14 people.
How difficult is it to rescue people in these conditions?
It's pretty difficult. Sometimes it can be very treacherous. It's all in the thrill, though. You know, I don't ever think of the danger. You know, you just kind of jump in for the fun of it.
Strong currents known as riptides can stop a swimmer from returning to shore. The pounding surf also caused this damage to a Catalina Island dry dock and ripped apart a lifeguard building that's a Malibu landmark. Carter Evans shared this view of what it was like to ride waves that have attracted thousands of spectators. The National Weather Service says this is the most significant southerly swell since 1996.
Forecasters expect the high surf to end tomorrow, but until then, Maurice, lifeguards say inexperienced swimmers should stay out of the water.
Now, for the first time since Israel imposed a blockade on the Gaza Strip in 2007, a United Nations aid convoy has arrived in the Palestinian territory from Egypt. The aid convoy has entered through the Rafah crossing. The World Food Program says the convoy carries enough food to last 150,000 people 5 days. The UN agency in Geneva says the convoy is carrying more than 15,000 parcels and vows to deliver more in the next few days. The WFP says it needed around $70 million to continue its mission for the next 3 months. Ending the blockade was a key Palestinian demand in talks with Israel for reaching a long-term ceasefire. Ashraf Shannon, our correspondent, joins us now from Gaza to bring us up to speed on the arrival of the aid convoy and how the aid is being distributed to the people of Gaza.
Well, the aid convoy arrived yesterday through the Egyptian-controlled Rafah crossing. This is Gaza's only gate to the outside world, bypassing Israeli crossings. The aid convoy had foodstuff, including canned food, beans, tea, and dates, enough for 150,000 people, and this could last them for only up to 5 days. But the aid that was brought in is not enough. The aid was brought in via the World Food Program. It's not enough to cater to the people who are displaced, especially the IDPs, or the internally displaced persons. There are nearly 500,000 of them, according to UN statistics. But what's very important here is the fact that Egypt has allowed a UN convoy to enter the Gaza Strip. We're talking about Egyptian authorities who, for many Palestinians in Gaza, are considered are part of the Israeli blockade that's been in place since 2007. Now, the aid did enter through Rafah crossing. This could be the fruit of the truce deal that was brokered by Egypt with the Palestinians and the Israeli regime. We have to understand that before the year 2000, before the start of the Second Palestinian Intifada, or the Al-Aqsa Intifada, there were 6 border crossings with Israel: Erez, Nahal Oz, Karni, Sofa, Kerem Shalom. But currently you have 2 crossings, one commercial, which is Kerem Shalom, at the southernmost tip of the Gaza Strip. It's functioning partially. And the other one is the Erez near northern Gaza, near the northern Gaza Strip town of Beth Hanun, and only acts as pedestrian crossing. And that one is also operating partially. Following the truce agreement, Erez started working again as it was prior to the war in Gaza, meaning prior to the 8th of July, when Israel's so-called Operation Protective Edge started. So we have several crossings that have been sealed by Israel since 2000, and the Palestinians are demanding that these commercial crossings be working again in the next few weeks or few months.
Ashraf, with the arrival of the aid convoy, this offers a glimmer of hope for the people of Gaza that if the siege is removed, it will help and assist them in rebuilding their lives. But the question is, will the Israelis keep their promises and keep their words? This isn't, if they don't, it won't be the first time, and for sure not the last time, that the Israelis have broken ceasefires and agreements and promises they've made with regards to Gaza.
Well, as far as the history tells us, Israel or the Zionists in general never respected any agreement with anyone, whether Palestinians or non-Palestinians. So we don't expect the Israelis, at least they might not break the promises for now, but at one point Israel will come up with something to violate the truce.
Absolutely. Ashraf Shannon, our correspondent, speaking to us from Gaza.
About 30 or 40 people. See blinds on snow and rock. Bird of May 18, 2003. Sergey down below.
So behind me is my Hypoxico training tent. I use it along with a stationary bike to do exercise at simulated altitudes of up to 21,000 feet. We essentially reduce the oxygen in the ambient air to make it feel like those higher altitudes. While I'm in there, I monitor my progress on this wrist system. Allows me to see how I'm doing in my workout and also make sure that I'm at the level of altitude that I want to be. Part of a system we use to pre-acclimatize by sleeping and training in low oxygen environments, which allow us to go to the world's biggest mountains and climb faster and higher.
Labor workers in Argentina are on a strike in protest against widespread inflation and rising unemployment. Members of Argentina's Central Workers Union have set up major blockades, congesting roads throughout the capital, Buenos Aires. 3 of the ailing country's 5 main union federations joined the 24-hour strike. The walkout shut down trains, trucks, and domestic flights. The Central Workers Union consists of numerous public sector unions and leftist organizations. The Central Organization of Argentina Union, covering public administration and the health sector, also began a longer 36-hour strike on Wednesday. The industrial action is a result of widespread anger caused by an ailing economy that has been stunned by a staggering unemployment rate and the high cost of living. To discuss that further, we're now joined with Manuel Giafoni, Press TV's correspondent, who is joining us live now from Buenos Aires. Now, Manuel, into this now second day, I believe, of the strike, how is the government reacting to all this?
Hi there. The government said initially that unions wouldn't join the strike, but in the end, a lot of this public services were disrupted. The transportation, for example, the trains were completely stopped. The subways, 3 of the 5 lines completely stopped, and the other ones were operating with problems. And the government said initially that there would be nobody would join the strike, or about 75% of the people were willing to work and were not striking. But at the end, the city was very empty today. People didn't go to work because of the experience they had with the previous strikes, or because they actually agree with the strike. A lot of people are very unsatisfied in Argentina with the unemployment and mostly with the inflation. In the past 6 months, the inflation has risen about 40%, and the salaries, on the other hand, didn't. They just increased about 20%, so people are very angry.
He has conducted an interview with Lebanon's Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil regarding the growing threat of the ISIL Takfiri militants against Lebanon's stability. Bassil says fighting ISIL requires the support of not only all domestic parties, but also the international community.
First, we need a political support.
And does that come from within?
From within and from the countries who pretend that they want to tackle terrorism. We need media support. We need a financial support. When we need arms, you cannot help us by giving us talkative support. No one can imagine that by letting Daesh grow, invade regions, and have the finance needed, that he is not hurting Lebanon and the stability of Lebanon and the stability of the region and the stability of Europe and the states, the United States.
To discuss that further, we're now joined by Professor Nabil Mikhail, who is a professor at George Washington University, and he's joining us live now from Washington. Now, Professor Mikhail, quite a direct statement, if I may call it that, by the Lebanese foreign minister, essentially saying that the region needs to unite in the face of this ISIL threat. Do you believe that that will happen, though?
I believe in what he said. He was totally correct. ISIS now is not a national problem. It is a regional crisis, and it could be a global crisis. So his analysis is right. But how can he help materialize his idea? I think if nations in the Middle East articulate their own national interest, I think they can join together to fight ISIS, because ISIS is really a dangerous entity that is moving fast. It could be defeated, and it could actually drag the whole area in a long-term conflict, so exhausting of its resources. So yes, the region leaders can talk, can address this threat. So there has to be a political will, a strategy, and let basically the resources of the nations in the area fight, not foreign powers. So I believe his diagnosis is right. And I perceive also some wisdom in his statement that ISIS could be defeated, because he thinks that if nations cooperate they can basically execute a successful policy. So he's right.
Now, Professor, you know, many people have accused various Persian Gulf countries, especially, of the fact that ISIS even came about because many private donors, if I may call them that, from many of these countries essentially started off ISIS with their money, if not even some support from some of their governments. But have they essentially created a monster which is now out of control? Are they willing to address what they may have created themselves?
You're right, they created a monster, but I think it is still controllable because ISIS cannot fight nation states. I mean, this is a basic concept in military sciences. Guerrillas are not bigger than nations. Revolutionary movements, radical movements cannot overcome or defeat regular armies. Military establishments in many countries, Iraq can defeat ISIS, but just help Iraq do it. So the monster can be controlled. Iraq can fulfill all of its aspirations to become a unified nation. No difference between Muslim, Christian, no difference between Shiite and Sunni. So help mobilize the resources of a country like Iraq. They can defeat ISIS. This way, you will not need a foreign nation or a foreign power to bomb ISIS locations. They have the logistics, they have the technology, they have the fighting ethos. So help the nation states fight ISIS. This is a simple message.
Okay, on that note, we'll leave it there for now. But of course, as always, Professor, we appreciate your insight. That was Professor Nabil Mikhail speaking to us live from Washington.
We end tonight with a man who, even at the age of 63, can keep up with the fastest thoroughbred racehorse. He has to. He's the track announcer. And now, after 4 decades of calling races, he's calling it a career. Here's Chip Reed.
And they're off. Tom Durkin has no idea
Carry me away and dreaming of
how many times he's uttered those 3 little words.
Royal suspicion under the line.
But it's been the opening refrain in a 40-year career.
Tahoe Tigress now a dozen lengths or more.
The soundtrack to racing's biggest moments. Like the 1998 duel at Belmont that cost Real Quiet the Triple Crown.
Victory Gallop, a final surge. It's going to be very close. Here's the wire. It's too close to call!
What are you going to miss the most?
Well, it's the passion. You know, this is my particular passion, describing the races, the competition. And I love telling stories. I love language.
Language, but also heart. Listen to the genuine surprise when a 50-to-1 shot won the Derby.
Mind that bird has won the Kentucky Derby. An impossible result here.
Or Durkin's anguish when Barbaro was injured in the 2005 Preakness.
An astonishing development here. Barbaro's being pulled up by Edgar Prado. He is out of the race.
For you, a race needs to have a plot. What do you mean by that?
Well, all stories have plot and narrative. Some plots are bigger, some are more dramatic, but there's something there for every race. Get gorgeous.
In fact, Durkin's at his best when making ordinary races unforgettable, often playing off the crazy names.
And oh no, it's my mother-in-law won't go away. It's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Kayum, bokum, congo, mondo, kayum, bokum, got it. And that was a mouthful.
His call of a horse named R is a YouTube favorite.
In the middle of the track is R. Sounds like I'm gargling. It was fun.
It is one of the toughest jobs in sports, memorizing not just the horses in 10 races a day, but all those colors. When the gates open, Durkin's style is to just let it rip.
It is Carry Me Away, the winner by 3. Predictability is the enemy of drama. If it's called a style, that's fine, but it's just me.
Tom Durkin, in his final furlong, winner by a country mile.